All right, welcome to Plug and Pay, a talk show where we speak with payroll professionals from all over the world about interesting, thought-provoking topics that are shaping today's global payroll space. My name is Mark Oliver Fiedler. I'm the founder and CEO of Payzar, and I'm the host of the show. We release new episodes every couple of weeks, and you can find them on our LinkedIn page, our YouTube channel, as well as Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Now, for this episode, I'm very excited to welcome to the show Bart Thunderstorm. Bart is founder and CEO of Payrollminds. Bart, great to have you on. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. To get us started, what would be great, Bart, is if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're up to, what you've been working on, how you got here.
Sure. Thank you, Mark, and very delighted to be part of this episode. So, as introduced by you, Bart Thunderstorm, I head up the company called Payrollminds, which I founded a couple of years ago together with two partners, Raymond and Sjoerd de Boer, Raymond Oemer and Sjoerd de Boer. And I guess my main purpose for Payrollminds stems from my period before Payrollminds. I've always been a self-employed HR and payroll consultant, supported quite large organizations through their entire end-to-end global HR and payroll endeavors, whether it was their strategies, whether it was helping them execute based on their strategies, whether it was supporting certain elements that need to be changed in the comp and ben areas, or whether it was a system implementation, you name it, it's where my background is started from. But during this entire life cycle of my career until now, I've always come across a unique set of people in the payroll and HR space. And I think we all recognize, and you probably also recognize, Mark, that there is a uniqueness in the HR payroll space related to the skill sets and the demeanor people are operating in. And second of all, I've always come across those clients that always have the question for the 10-legged sheep type of approach, meaning they're looking for an operation manager, project manager, somebody who can take care of the actual payroll, who is able to communicate at all levels, builds plans, builds change management plans, and can do it all in 40 hours of time. So in my imagination, when starting Payrollminds, I had two ideas in mind. One was to build an organization for the payroll and HR professionals and to be an incubator, if you will. And then the second thing was to provide clients with the best set of skill sets, whether it be in one person, whether it be in a multitude of a couple of people, but at least to provide them with the skill set required to be successful in this area. So, so far, so good. We've grown from 3 partners into 40 plus consultants. We have a couple of people who are self-employed, but most of the people are employed by us. And we've got a very unique mix of different types of personalities and nationalities. So we have people from Asia, we've got people from LATAM, and people from all over Europe. And yeah, very exciting. I think as part of our endeavors, we came across you, Mark Oliver. We spoke about Payzar and the great stuff that Payzar can offer to clients that we actually help and support. And we started talking that way, and now we're in this podcast. So again, so much, and excited to answer all your questions.
Fantastic. Well, I think it's a great story, and as you described, I think bringing experts from various different backgrounds, experiences, parts of the world together to help organizations solve some of the payroll challenges that they're looking at, right? And some of them are, as you mentioned, require very special skills that don't exist in just every organization. I think it's a great idea. It's a great model, and I'm excited to watch you and your team grow the business and have the success that you guys are having. Now, talking about that model, obviously, I would imagine typically when your team is being brought into an organization, that's to help address some, specific challenges that the payroll department is grappling with, and that can involve process changes, that can involve looking at new technology. and maybe this is a slightly awkward question, but I guess I'm wondering, is there anything that payroll teams or payroll leaders should be doing so that they don't need you and your team to come in? Is there anything that they could be doing on their own better to solve their own challenges?
Yeah. Listen, now whether they can ever do without us, obviously.
Absolutely not. No one can replace Payrollminds.
Yeah, I guess it's the question to start with that one. I think the question is, does an organization that is, for example, operating in the retail business or operates in the in any type of business, if it's not the payroll HR business, then my ask of them would always be, why would you become an expert in something that you don't want to be an expert in? So from that perspective, I would always argue to hire people like myself and my organization, as well as to acquire systems and support from companies like you're offering yourself with Paysar, to support them in being the most efficient and effective in HR and payroll as they possibly can. But nevertheless, I think the most important element that I believe organizations and leaders of the payroll HR organizations need to think of for themselves is, what is it that we're changing, and where is it changing from? And then asking that question, you obviously have to thoroughly look for the right answer. So being able to really articulate what's going on today, what problem am I trying to solve here, and what are my requirements, and where do I want to go? And when you ask yourself in the HR payroll space, where do I want to go, you actually ask the question from a people, process, and technology perspective. And if you already have a bespoke HR system that can already pretty much dictate how your process needs to look like moving towards payroll, or when you are an organization that is heavy in data around the time and attendance, then clearly that tool, and maybe there's a planning tool on top of it as well, also dictates a little bit where you need to go with your procedure. But first and foremost, the question that people should ask themselves is, what are my requirements? And for this, you can already spend months and months of discussions. And then where I want to go is an element of vision. It's an element of determination. It's also a matter of focus. But I think that question could be asked to a consultant firm, and they can provide you with certain targets that you should be trying to hit. Nevertheless, it's an important element of the entire equation. The amount of times that I come with clients, or I come in front of a new customer, and they have no idea where they want to go with their payroll. They just purchased a new tool, and then they assume that everything would be right, which it's a good step forward. But not having your processes and your people and your processes in order will not help you resolve the issue. And then last comment to make is the funny, and it's meant a bit funny, but it is not. It's like the best tool that people ultimately build once they've purchased a new tool is the tool they've had. Meaning, the amount of times that organizations are trying to rebuild what they already had is significant. And it sounds, again, as I said, it sounds funny, but it isn't. On the other hand, it also begs the question: hey, why are you leaving a system or a process that apparently works well for you guys? And so as a consultant, I always ask these questions to clients, like, why are you changing?
Yeah,
it will dictate the life cycle of the next year. It will dictate all the programs, all the projects, because running an HR payroll program or changing HR payroll systems and organizations cannot be done without the help and without the support of anyone in the organization, because it impacts everybody.
Right. Yeah. It takes a tribe to make it happen. Now, talking about your point of understanding where you're coming from, where you're trying to go, why you're trying to implement change, and applying that to a specific client situation. And one that we encounter, for example, fairly frequently is overall organizational change that's occurring. Let's say you're running payroll in a growth company, in a scale-up company, and that company is growing to become and trying to set itself up as a more of an enterprise level organization. From a payroll perspective, in that sort of scenario, what would be some of the things that, me as a payroll leader, I need to, set up in my payroll environment in order to support that, progress and growth into a bigger, larger, more mature organization?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference between a startup into scale up into more enterprise is the level of acceptance towards manual and the level of acceptance towards making it happen. Meaning, I believe specifically in the HR payroll space, but I believe any organization will always have loads of people that just want to make it happen. But the question is, do they really understand what that means? And so the biggest difference between start scale up into enterprise is the discussion about roles and responsibilities, meaning who owns which piece of the puzzle. And with that question, you should automatically already realize that there is a cross-functional process in front of you, because the payroll process or the HR process, or you can never claim it to be one organization's complete responsibility. It starts with recruitment. HR has a piece of the puzzle related to policies and procedures, and then typically data needs to be moved, and then you need to apply all the rules and regulations ultimately down into the finance systems that need to be recorded in the P&L. So the entire organization needs to be understanding the roles and responsibilities, and the decisions that need to be made, especially from scale up towards enterprise, is who ultimately owns or who ultimately is responsible for the entire end-to-end, and then also who owns the actual results of the process. And with that decision, you can decide on where does the systems belong, where do the procedures belong, who ultimately makes the decision of whether to go left or right. Do the people who you employ, do they have a clarity around who they report into? Do they have a career path? Do you have sufficient bench? And what I mean with this is, do you have sufficient skill sets on your bench to be able to grow and to continue to grow? And then I would say, most importantly, within this roles and responsibilities matrix, you need to have the right level of collaboration going on. It's okay to be upset with each other. It's okay not to be in sync with each other about what needs to happen and where it needs to happen. But ultimately, you do need to make sure that you have open communication with each other, because in the end of the day, there's a client and there is a customer that will suffer, and typically that's the employee. So with that in mind, my advice: make sure you've got clarity around roles and responsibilities.
You talked about this sort of overall end-to-end ownership, being clear who's actually leads and drives. In your experience, I mean, payroll in some organizations, well, many organizations, either rolls up under HR or rolls up under finance, and some organizations it's managed to establish kind of its own functional independence. Do you have a view on who should be owning the kind of end-to-end process, or what does that depend on?
I think the one who owns it should have should be loaded and balanced with the right level of resources to be able to own it. But I think this is the bottom line, and this is why roles and responsibilities is probably more important than ultimately who owns the entire. And think about it, Mark. It's like, if there's a tool, is there IT involved? Do they own the tool? If there is a time and attendance tool, or if there's a planning organization that plans these people, all the way down into whether the general ledger hits the finance systems. In the end of the day, the organization that is responsible for making it all happen needs to make sure they have the connection with their stakeholders. I've seen it happen. I've seen it being successful in all areas. I've seen it being successful as an entire organization by itself, so payroll as an organization. Yeah. I've seen it being successful in HR. I've seen it being successful in finance. I think my preference, due to the nature of compliance and due to the nature of HR, when I think about HR, apart from the fact that they're great people and they have a unique skill set, I think the most important element you want to set up your HR for is for them to be business partners, for them to be able to create policies and ensure that these policies are being adhered to. I don't necessarily see the HR folks as to be Excel gurus or data-minded people. They can do it, no biases whatsoever. But I think that's not what they're naturally educated for. And yet, people in the payroll finance areas, they are more naturally drawn towards data, spreadsheets, controls, etc. So I think if you really want to build towards the core and the context skill sets of the various people involved in the end-to-end process, I would say owning the actual data systems and compliance elements of the payroll process naturally sits better in finance than it does in HR, my opinion.
Okay, good. Now imagine when you guys start a new client project, part of that is just getting a better understanding, analyzing what's the current process landscape look like, how things working, what systems are already in place. And I'm curious, do you guys have some sort of framework or guiding principles that you apply when you're walking into a client project? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, the honest answer is we do not have a bespoke model. Sure, in the future we will have one, but this is more related to, there's so many overlaying questions that I believe every organization that I support have, similar to the others. And so bringing those to the table and helping the client with certain benchmarks, certain best practices, with certain visions that they can leverage from in order to make the right decisions, definitely is something I would like to bring to the table. But when talking to a client, I typically focus more on the actual problems that they need and the skill set of the potential team that I need to put in place in order to support the client. And from a model perspective, we at Payrollminds, we're working on this model, and I've adopted it to the name of T-shaped payroll. There's a T-shaped marketeer that already exists, but part of my our DNA and part of our development is to build a similar model for the payroll professional, and basically says, here's all the skills that you could have, and in the perfect scenario you will have as a HR payroll professional, depending on your level, depending on your scope. But then depending on the client and whether it is countries involved, it's an easy ask, meaning if you are a French payroll specialist but somebody wants you to run Germany, you'll probably struggle a little bit, not necessarily from a payroll perspective, from a language perspective. And so that's one skill that is easily to be determined. But whether somebody needs a payroll manager or project manager, or whether somebody needs an architect that can help draw up the entire infrastructure, or a combination of this is where we typically first focus on the approach. And then the secondary approach we always take is, let's first do a state of the pit, I call it. It's a bit of terminology, but it basically means I'd like to see for myself, or I'd like my consultants to see for themselves, what is really, what's the landscape look like, no matter the systems, system process architecture, and so that they can really see, hey, which tools, what is the status of these tools, including the processes and procedures, and who's involved in the process. Because if we don't have this starting point, any change or any move forward, we'll potentially run into some difficulties. Because with payroll, and I'm sure you live this every day yourself, is that you do not have the luxury to not do it right. You don't have the luxury not to pay someone. And so whatever you change, whatever you do, you need to make sure you know exactly what it is you're doing. And the way I characterize this, and I think I did this before to you as well, Mark, is, I always assume I'm going to take down, or I'm going to completely take down a complete airplane. and then I'm going to rebuild it again, and then I'm going to be the first one to fly it. So, you can only imagine what happens if you didn't do it right. So, yeah. So that's my idea around this question. Yeah.
Perfect. Now, when your team comes in, obviously, I imagine the typical situation is there's a specific issue or challenge that a client is facing. That's why they're calling you and trying to get some outside in perspective on how to tackle this and how to move forward. And I'm curious, are there specific situations, challenges that you encounter over and over again? What's the most common, challenges and situations that you tend to encounter?
Yeah, the most commonly asked question is clearly, hey, how do we connect our HR system with our payroll system? And I'm sure you're all too familiar to those questions simply because you've built an.
We hear that a few times, yeah.
You build a whole tool to be able to facilitate as such. But then when I actually engage and deep dive a little bit into it, then the reason why these tools don't communicate is because they're not compatible with each other. So either the data in the HR system is insufficient or incomplete, or it's not being entered timely, or there's only a subset of data and more of half of it is missing from a data set perspective, or the system that you use to that you need to interface into, they're so bespoke and so dispersed across all the different countries that you almost end up building an interface per country. Mm-hmm. But most of the time,
which you shouldn't have to, right?
Because yeah, true.
Ways of solving that.
Yeah. You solve this question, but I mean, I think these people don't really realize that there's a starting point of data, and then as soon as you start entering data in the system, it needs to be complete, it needs to be accurate, and it needs to be timely. And within those three categories, there are so many things that can go wrong. And so when people tell me, hey, I'm not able to interface, or I'm not able to connect the dots between those two tools, it's typically one, because the compatibility between the two tools, but that's normally an easy fix, specifically also with some of the great tools that you've built. But then even if you connect the tools, the accuracy of the data, the timeliness is going to be key. And that's where I see the most organizations struggle the most. How do you get the data correctly and timely into your systems?
Yeah. And you said something interesting. You said, the clients are looking at connecting the HR tool to their payroll. But as you pointed out, it starts with understanding where's all the data that you actually need to process your payroll. So in a lot of situations, it's not as simple as just saying, let's take my Workday HR system or my SAP SuccessFactors or Oracle system and just connect that up to my different local payrolls, which in and of itself obviously is already not an easy task, right? To take a HR system and make sure that the data flows correctly between that and all your different local payroll calculation tools and engines. And I'm curious whether you have these kind of discussions with your clients as well. Because we run into conversations with our clients around this connectivity and integration discussion where, a lot of times the conversation starts with, I'm looking for a Workday integration, right? And then once you start digging into it a little bit, the conversation starts to broaden and you start to realize, well, Workday is really just one piece of the puzzle, right? There's all these other data tools that sometimes the client's not even consciously aware of. They're not really thinking that, oh, that's true. Actually, my commissions data is not coming from Workday, right? That's coming from a separate tool. My benefits information doesn't completely come out of Workday either, right? There's separate, data sources for that. So I'm curious whether in your kind of education and, the thought process that you're going through with your clients, you're running into that kind of discussion as well.
Spot on. And this is where, and again, there's so many great tools out there. Workday is one, SAP is two. There's a variety in between. I guess the thing is always, you can look at HR data from a global perspective, but you cannot look at payroll data from a global perspective. You can look at it from a global perspective, but it doesn't mean much, because ultimately you need to be locally compliant. So where global meets local is where most companies struggle, but also where most HR systems are not necessarily designed to be able to do so. And even if these tools are designed to do it, it's so bespoke towards any individual client that the investment needed to get everything into a model that works across the end-to-end process, country by country, is one you should ask yourself worth investing in. If you have all the money on earth and you've got deep pockets, by all means, go for it, and you'll probably be able to leverage from it and to be successful with it for a long period of time. But the reality is, payroll is a mission critical organization within the company. It's not core to what the company is doing. So, build something that works without having to do the huge investment. And that's I think where. And then combined with the responsibility discussion where I started with this conversation with is, it ends up with, hey, but I thought you were, and by the way, this is your responsibility versus this is my responsibility. And in the end of the day, there's one party that suffers, and this is typically the employee. And so when you really want to solve the problem, my advice is always work your way backwards from the employee into your process, and ask yourself, what does the employee experience, and how can you improve that experience? And what you need to do in hindsight of that, behind the curtain, is important. But in the end of the day, a happy employee is worth more than a well-functioning process that doesn't generate happy employees. So it's the balance that you need to find.
Yeah. No, I resonate with that very much. I think working your way back from, as you said, employee, their payroll experience, and kind of looking at your entire process through that lens of what needs to happen upstream in order to deliver that desired outcome, i.e. on time, error-free payroll. I think a lot can be learned if you kind of peel back the entire process, all the way back to where it originates, where the data comes from. I think a lot can be learned where things kind of fall to the wayside along that process when you take that apart. Now, one of the things that I think we've all learned over the last few years is, and I think it applies to payroll, change is constant, right? Things are always in flux, and there's always the next crisis or the next sort of big event looming around the corner. And I think what that's taught all of us, probably in our personal lives, but also in our professional environment, is you got to be able to adapt, and you got to be agile, right? So I wonder how the concept of agile management, agile methodologies, how does that apply to the kind of problems that we're just talking about? Data connectivity, integration, having better, stronger controls around your processes. How do you see that?
Yeah, interesting enough, we and Payrollminds, we are developing a Payrollminds of doing, and this is for lack of a better word, but it is basically a combination of Kanban, Scrum, Six Sigma, Lean, but it also it tries to solve the problem of how do you run an efficient payroll operations, or how do you run an efficient and effective payroll project. What are those unique touch points that you need to build upon? Now, one of the issues that, whilst trying to implement this with our clients, Mark, is that one client works on Scrum, the other one is more Kanban, a third one works with a tool called whatever, Asana, and then the third one uses another tool. And so, but then trying to interject your methodology in an organization that already has a methodology is not easy. And in the end of the day, I think my main focus is around the governance of the projects, the governance of the organization, and this stems back to the roles and responsibilities discussion. It's like, okay, where are the issues being addressed? Who's responsible for solving those issues? Where are the decisions being made? Who ultimately creates, then decides on what the priorities are, and in which forums and or meetings and councils or committees are the projects being determined. And so, you know, being able to be successful with the client always at my level ends up with a discussion about, okay, who's the sponsor and what is the span of control that this sponsor has, and does this sponsor also have the budget, or is the budget still needed to be requested? That is for me a big indicator of how mature the organization is and how well positioned they are to be successful. Now, clearly, the consultant we can solve for all the issues that occur from not having the correct governance or not having the right level of maturity yet. But there's also a matter of of finance and a matter of commercials. And so from an agile perspective, I like the Kanban Scrum methodology. I think it's good for organizations to see results quickly, and I think it's and to see these results quickly being resonated in the organization, meaning a leader or a general manager of a business unit, when they see the results or see some results, it's always easier and better for them to sell, instead of being told, listen, something is coming and it will be better than you had before, but you know, hold your breath, and for another half a year it will be fine. And then in the meanwhile, see things going wrong, you know, clearly you lose their buy-in, you lose their sponsorship. So I like that methodology, but I also struggle with, you know, introducing it to the clients in the proper manner. So hence that I'm defaulting in more of the governance discussions than actually the methodology discussion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Now, Bart, you've obviously in your in your experience, you've seen lots of different payrolls and how they're run, and you know the challenge they bear in a variety of different client organizations. And I wonder, from that exposure that you've had to different payrolls, different challenges, different situations, are there any key learnings that you've taken away from that? Anything that you can pass on to, you know, payroll leaders that are listening to this? They're thinking about, you know, what should I be thinking about? What should I be watching out for? What could I be doing to operate better, to improve my performance?
Yeah, I think first of all, you need to make sure you've got the right mix and the right level of problem solvers in your organization. Meaning, running payroll is problem solving. And it's whether that is at the employee level, whether it is on the country level, whether it's on the global level, whether it is with HR data, whether it is with payroll data, it's all about problem solving. And there's no easy way out. If somebody has a net impact on their payroll and it stems from a pension calculation that went wrong, believe me, there's always a bigger underlying issue that is ugly. So problem solving is really liking to problem solve. And the second thing I would say is very important for those leaders is to ensure that they have a sense of ownership, even if you're not owner of the entire process. You know, owning the problem and carrying the problem through the entire organization towards resolution is, I think, one of the key attributes to be able to be successful. And now, doing so, you obviously need to be careful with your own responsibility set. But you know, the many times I come across those organizations that they know what the problem is, but the problem is nobody wants to fix the problem because nobody seems to own it. Again, is not the right answer. So myself, whilst I was a consultant, but also my consultants, I always teach them to own the problem, even if it is owning the problem towards a solution, and meaning to get the people together to talk about what the issue is. gets you way further down the path than being the one who's vocal about what the problem is, but not being able to pick it up. So I believe if that's your mindset, if that's how you operate, if anything, you'll at least earn the credibility from your peers and from the organization that you're not the one pointing at the problem, but you're one fixing it. And then whilst doing so, ensure you build the right team around you. You know, the amount of times that I see, and it's got nothing to do with the actual individuals, because in essence, all of them are unique and are very solid in what they do, but you just need the right mix of people, and not everybody is up to a change versus something that is working well. Not everybody's up to changing a system versus, you know, feeling that they're comfortable in what they do. So, you know, having non-changers in your organizations while going through a change can be completely opposite of what you're wanting to achieve. And the other way around, similar. If you only want people that want to change, this is the personality that I have. You know, my anecdote is, if I am with an organization for too long, I start making problems because I hate it when the problems are gone. And that's why I've always been a consultant and always been, you know, self-employed, because I move from problem to problem, which I love doing and love fixing anyhow. So, but that's another thing is, you know, if you only have those people that love to fix things, you know, that's not the right mix as well. You need to have a healthy mix between people who do, people who want to think, and people who want to change. And so, you know, that would be my answer. Yeah.
And do you have, talking about that mix of people, I like that, you know, the point about, you know, you need to have people that are ready for the change and drivers of the change and the catalyst, and, you know, that like to go in and tackle new challenges. But then, as you said, if you have only those, that also, you know, becomes non-sustainable probably, right? Because they will just start going up the walls and start to, you know, take things apart that maybe need to be stabilized, need to settle down for a bit. But taking the people that maybe are more comfortable with no change, right? How in your projects, because I imagine your projects, when you're coming in, it is to, you know, rattle the cage a bit and, you know, think about what could be done differently. When you encounter these organizations where maybe there's a bit too much of the, you know, I'm comfortable with how things are today, how do you take those people along? How do you drive change with an organization where maybe the comfort level of change is not as developed as you need it to be for a big transformation?
Well, my first and foremost advice is always make sure you identify those different needs, because, you know, it can easily become the big elephant in the room, and then it is easy. You can easily get into a finger pointing and into an area where, believe me, you don't want to get there. You don't want to be there. So first of all, acknowledging those people and respecting those people one way or another around how they would like to contribute is key. And then second of all, yeah, sometimes in many occasions, it is a matter of then determining the fact that in the future, there might not be a place for those people anymore, simply because you go from a manual or an in-house into an outsourced, fully automated. Not everybody's up to it. So that's also a realization you need to come into quite soon into the game, because it will enable you to find the right solution for it. But then assuming the people that currently run the show and will continue to run the show after it's all been implemented, you need to take them along the ride. And you know, I always characterize it as, you know, we're driving 100 miles an hour and we're changing the wheels, we're changing the wheels of the car whilst running the show. So in that case, you just need to make sure that those people that are going to run the show moving forward, that they continue to be part of the project, they continue to be part of all the changes, but they're not necessarily the ones who actually have to make the change to realize the change. They just need to adopt to the new way of working. And you do this by the proper training, you do this by ensuring you interject the right level of information with them, Potentially, I'd like to engage them immediately after we are in the second test phase, meaning you've done your parallel test, you know everything works, but now you want to have them, start to feel the system, start to work with the system. So that's typically where I'm bringing them along, so that whilst getting out of your final phase of testing, you can, hit the ground running and move forward with the actual payroll process. Now, we've been fairly successful doing so, but those people that really not like change, believe me, they will not like change, even if you provide it to them on the gold platter. So acknowledging in that and having the right level of mindset around it is important. And yeah, if you do so, you'll probably be able to get 75 to 80% along. But don't be afraid to also, let go of people who just don't want to be in that place moving forward.
Yeah.
You know what I find very interesting about the conversation we've been having now is, you've spoken a lot about, more than maybe I expected, a lot around the people that are involved, the organization, the profile mix, the ownership, right? It's all sort of, in a way, kind of the HR around the payroll team, right? And I think it's very I find that very enlightening, because all too often we think about payroll challenges as, well, there's the vendor and I got to figure out how to work with the vendor, and there's the processes, I got to fix the process, and there's the technology piece and the systems piece. But all the things we now talked about, well, they obviously factor into all of these different aspects, how to get more out of your vendors and how to work more effectively across functions and so on. But it's really a big sort of work challenge, right? Organizational challenge, people challenge, and that's where I can also bring us back to the kind of work that you guys do at Payrollminds. I can totally see how having someone come in from the outside who comes in without all the baggage that invariably exists within an organization, all the personal walls that maybe have built up, or dynamics that have evolved over time, come in and holds up a mirror to the organization, says, this is what we're kind of observing here, and you need an outside perspective to maybe, especially some of these organizational challenges can also become very political, right? That can help to untangle these. I think it's a very interesting part of the work that you guys do.
Yeah, thanks. And I generally see it this way. I think, the HR payroll space from a systems and from a vendor's perspective is maturing up very fast. So I think not having the right ability to buy the right tools or the right vendor models is not necessarily an excuse anymore. So it's almost like, you can buy the best kitchen out there you can buy, but that doesn't make you Gordon Ramsay. So which means, you still have to stir the pots, and you still have to make the right grocery shoppings, and you still need to ensure everybody has know what their tasks are. And ultimately it all needs to come together at the same time on the plate. So what drives the difference is, of course, people. Now, if you do it right and you get the right level of mix of people, and you really make the change, then ultimately the systems, the vendors, the partnership with the vendors, and again, this is more people oriented than system oriented. I've seen great tools, whether it is, I will not name any names, doesn't matter, but whichever tool you buy, if your partnership with the vendor who provides you with the tool is not good, or even is bad, the likelihood of you ever being successful is not too slim. And so, selecting partners and then the tools, and selecting the right level of partners that really resonate with who you are and who you want to be is as important as to buy the right skill set. So, the many clients that I come across who believe that all their issues are coming from one system, I wish it was, because then our world would be very easy. Huh?
Yeah. The world is a bit more complex than that. Excellent. Bart, To finish up, what we always like to do on this show is something that we call the lightning round. I'll ask you a set of quick questions, and you just respond with whatever comes to mind first. Yeah, you're up for it?
Yeah.
Perfect. First question: when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I already gave it a little bit, but I always wanted to be a chef, a cook, so a chef cook. So yeah.
I can hear that. Yeah. Nice. What do you love when you what do you love to hear or see when you first encounter a new client?
The perfect scenario for me is them to recognize that we've come in with a skill set, and that they're giving us, the keys towards, and they're asking us to provide them with the advice and that we believe see fit. The amount of times that I come across a client that says, listen, we want to fix payroll. By the way, we already chosen a vendor. Like, yeah, well, how did you get about that? How do you know which vendor to choose if you don't have a clue about what the issues are you're trying to solve? So those clients that really hire us to be helping them draw up a vision and a mission and then a strategy, those are our perfect scenarios.
Okay. What are the 3 main tips that you would give to somebody who is about to become a new payroll leader?
Yeah, I think similar to the entire conversation, people, process. So the people, make sure you find the right people around you. Also recognize that they're probably the skill set you require already in your organization, but you just need to recognize it and help them grow. The second thing is be a problem solver. So embrace problems and embrace the willingness to own them until they're fixed. And then the third is make sure that the roles and responsibilities are clear. Even if you don't own the entire process, being able to articulate your expectations of the process and being able to articulate what the agreements were, and then holding the other party accountable for either the success or maybe the malfunction of that process, allows the entire process to flourish. But also you as a leader, it gets you out of the element of bias, it gets you out of the element of emotions, and it allows you to be above the issues instead of being in it as a little bit of an overcooked project manager. So staying above it and ensure that the right level of governance exists is key. Yeah.
I like how you brought it back to cooking with the overcooked project manager. There is a theme there. Which brings me to my last question. What gives you most satisfaction in your job?
In my current job as a leader of Payrollminds, I think finding the right people and owning and helping them own their careers and being an incubator to grow their careers is definitely what I wake up for every morning. And especially when you have success, but also when you feel like you're not going down the route that you'd like to go with an individual, steering it back into where you believe it could be, with the people and the person in mind. That's where I really my passion is. So yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah. Well, listen, you guys have assembled a great team, and you're doing very exciting work in bringing the expertise that collective group that you've assembled is able to bring to your clients, and it's exciting to watch how you're shaping your organization, how you're influencing the whole space, the payroll space. So I think it's great that you guys exist, and we're very happy from our side that we have crossed paths, and excited about the collaboration that we're forming between Payrollminds and Payzar.
Yeah, same here. Thank you.
Yeah. So listen, I guess that's it for today's show. Bart, thank you again for coming on and for sharing your thoughts, your perspective. I found it very enlightening to hear, how you're approaching, the challenges and the the issues that clients are struggling with, and coming at it from a very people-oriented perspective. I really like that. Any last shout-outs? Anything that you want to leave the listeners with before we go?
No, I guess only towards you and your organization, Mark. I think you guys have impressed me with your tool. I think it's a leap forward, and I'll encourage everybody who's listening to also have a look into what you guys have to offer, because I believe a lot of data and connectivity issues can be resolved with your tool. And if only that tool existed when I was 25 years old, my life would have been much easier. So all kudos to the great tool and the team you've built, and again, similar to yourself, looking forward to the ongoing collaboration together.
That's very kind of you. Thank you for the kudos. We did not pay you to say that. I will just say that, but no, I appreciate that. Look, excellent. Well, listen, that's it for today's episode. Thank you everyone for joining us. Hopefully you liked what you heard today. If you did, and if you'd like to find out about other discussions, other guests that we've had on this show, make sure to subscribe to our podcast, and give us a like so we can make sure that more people find out about this. And we look forward to talking to you all very soon again. Until then, have a great day.